Hi, everybody. This is part 16 part series on the subject of at the end of the day, what will you be remembered for? Will you be remembered as a person of faith? When I was younger, I was very impulsive and very reckless. I would get an idea in my head and I would just run with it. I wouldn't evaluate the thought, I wouldn't research the idea, I wouldn't even explore it. I would just take off with it. And oftentimes, the consequences for doing that, I would fail and fall flat on my face. I made these kind of decisions in relationships. I made these kind of decisions for financial reasons, for professional reasons, for job reasons. Um, I was just not getting, I wasn't being remembered or known as a person you could trust. I was being known as a person who was just a loudmouth, a big talker. You see, I was very self-centered, self-promoting, and self-serving. It was all about me. I remembered one time that right after my dad passed away, I had this idea about having this really big event for him, in honor of him. It was, I wanted to put on this Christian rock concert in my hometown. Um, I remember talking to a local Christian band that was, pretty well known. I talked them into performing for free. I went and found a hall, a building that would hold up to 3,000 people, and they would put the chairs up for me for pennies on the dollar. The building was on the Nebraska State Fairgrounds. The acoustics was pretty good, but they allowed me to have it for pennies on the dollar. That was all the planning I did. I didn't coordinate with anybody. I didn't promote it. I didn't really talk about it with much. So the day of the concert shows up, the band is up on the stage, they're ready to go. And I'm standing in the middle of this building with 3,000 empty chairs. Me, the band, and 3,000 empty chairs. I was angry that no one showed up, and I was embarrassed that no one showed up. But the challenge was I didn't do anything to promote the idea. I thought it was my idea. It's kind of like the old movie in the baseball field. If you build it, they'll come. That's kind of what I thought. You know what? People think this is a good idea. They'll show up. They didn't show up. That's how reckless my thinking was because my thinking was about promoting me. Hi, I'm Bob Bauer. And this is, as I said, this is part three of a 16-part series on the subject at the end of the day, what will you be remembered for? Back in those days when I was younger, I did not understand the meaning of adding value to anybody else's life. I didn't even know how to add value to my own life, to be honest with you. I was I was a mess because you see, I made me the center of my focus, the center of my life, and as a result of that, I paid the ultimate price, and oftentimes others did as well. Well, when I was preparing to make this vlog, this podcast, whatever you want to call it, when I was preparing to do this, I did a lot of research, and I had all these names and everything to come up that I could talk to you about. The people who started off poorly, but by the grace of God, they ended well. Because I never encourage you to start off poorly. Um, Rather, I will encourage you to start off well and end well. But, the one name that kept coming into my mind when I was thinking about someone who lived a similar concept of life as I did was a young shepherd boy back in Israel. Um, Widely documented life, widely talked about life in the Bible. He was known as the shepherd boy David. Tall, good looking kid. who at the young age, at the teenage age, as a teenager, was anointed to be the second king of Israel. Now, the neat thing about David was David, for the most part, always made God the center of his life. And as a result of that, he experienced a lot of successes because it was not about him, but rather it was about bringing glory to God. But yet there is a flip side of David. When David made David the center of his life, David faced controversy and tragedy. His successes are widely known, such as, the Battle of David and Goliath, his military expeditions, and how successful he was with that. He was widely known and respected. He was recognized as a man after God's own heart. But as all those successes played out, we know that there were tragedies and failures. Bathsheba, married to another man, actually a warrior. David stayed back from the battlefield when he should have been out there with his men, but he stayed back. And one day he happened to see this young, beautiful woman bathing. He had a physical encounter with her, and as a result, she became pregnant. Well, David not only committed adultery, now there was going to be a baby from this liaison, this unholy liaison. David was fearful that he would be found out, so he had the woman's husband brought back from the front line, hoping he would spend the night with his wife, and they would have a night of enjoyment. And thereby, when she announced she was pregnant, her husband would take credit for the child. But the husband did no such thing. So David, in order to protect his own hiney, had her husband killed on the battlefield, and then married Bathsheba, who then had a child, who then didn't live that long, actually died. The failures of David, Bathsheba, adultery, murder of the spouse, loss of a child, not to mention facing the anger of God for doing things against God's will. But undoubtedly, David always recognized that if God is the center of his life, he will face those successes. And you see, David's been long gone. He's been written about tremendously in the Bible, and others have have written books about him, about his candor, his integrity, his character, his faith, his rock solid faith. So in the end, what is David known for? Even though David faced tragedies in his life, he will always be remembered as a man after God's own heart. He'll be remembered as a man of faith. Well, life is a series of challenges. And when we face challenges, there's no promise, whether God is the center of our life or not, that we will not feel the pain of those challenges. But with God, we grow from each encounter. Because if God is the center of our life, we gain knowledge. We gain wisdom, we gain understanding, and we are all the wiser for the experience. Because of that, we're successful. It doesn't mean we won't feel the pain. It means that we have a greater power to guide us and protect us. From that, we will always be successful. Well, I want to talk about this woman that I met 7 years ago. And she too will always be known as a person of faith, a person after God's own heart. Her name is Elizabeth Dowling Bailey, Dr. Bailey. Well, today, October 29th, happens to be Dr. Bailey's 89th birthday. And unfortunately, she happens to be spending her birthday in the hospital in a town in Tennessee. She had surgery today. She'll go home tomorrow. But you know what? I met Doc Bailey, like I said, about 7 years ago. And I'm going to tell you, Doc Bailey is the most intelligent woman I have ever met in my life. You see, she's not an ordinary woman. She's very unique. She is one of a handful of women that were selected and earned the right to attend medical school during her time in the state of Tennessee. A handful of women selected to attend medical school within a male-dominated profession. I once asked her, did you feel like you were slighted or treated differently when you were in medical school? Did you feel like you had to work harder than the guys? And her comment to me was, no. The fellows in my class accepted me as one of them. We were all on this journey together. We all wanted to become doctors. No one was sexist. No one was racist. They were all in it together to achieve the same goal. But there was one fella that had a keen eye on her. That fella was William Perry Bailey Jr., who became her husband, the father of her children, and her soulmate. But you know, Doc Bailey, as a young doctor and a mother, she was raising 4 kids while she was treating the less fortunate children and their families in the state of Tennessee. She was constantly active in her community, her church, her civic and social settings, always encouraging her kids to learn, to participate, to be more than what they thought they could be. Not only did she raise her 4 children with her husband, they also raised foster children. And in fact, they were known to cover the college tuition of many of the less fortunate kids in the community. As I said earlier, she was very active in the community. She was very active in her church, and she was a Sunday school teacher to the youth in middle school, or junior high and high school at that time. Now, she was a unique Sunday school teacher when she was teaching. You see, she wouldn't just look at the lesson book and look up the scriptures and deliver those to us. She would research the subject like she was preparing a term paper. And when she presented her resources to her classroom, it was as though they were a college-level class. She was teaching them beyond what the curriculum wanted to learn. She wanted them prepared for the future. She always looks at those who have less fortune than her. She always looked out for those who did not have the benefits that she had gained of being a doctor. I was told one time that she was a compassionate woman and had compassion towards veterans, especially those who had died alone. She made it a point in her hometown, where there is a veterans cemetery and there is a Veterans Affairs Medical Center. She made it a point to be notified every time a veteran passed away that did not have a family. For oftentimes you would find her at a graveside service that included her, a chaplain, and the gravediggers. No hero should leave this country, no hero should leave this world alone was her feelings. Dot Bailey's a wonderful woman. I personally think she's awesome. Now, at the end of the day, when she relocates to her permanent home, she will always be remembered as a woman of faith that added values to others' lives. So let me say this, at the end of the day, what will you be remembered for? I'm Bob Bauer. This is what will you be remembered for at the end of the day. Now go add value to somebody's life.